Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. This afternoon's session is around design, developing design and 3D printing. I'm really excited this afternoon as well to have with us Julie and Chris from V&A Dundee, and they are going to talk about design from their perspective, how they have resources as well that may be of interest to you. So this afternoon I'm going to put this into context because our focus is going to be to look at how maybe 3D design and the principles of design are being used in BGE. So in support of the work that you're already doing as leads in this area, there's lots of stuff going on, so it's maybe an awareness raising around some signposting of resources, some existing work, and maybe hopefully discussion, if it's either with your mics off or in the chat, around how this could be used in transitional work, etc. So I'm conscious that a lot of you may know some of the stuff that I'm going to cover, but hopefully some of it will be new or interesting to you. And as I say, we've got Julie and Chris who are going to talk about V&A Dundee, how there's 3D resources there, but I'll let them speak around the design process as well. So just within the national context, so obviously you as CDET and design technology teachers are all hugely familiar with the CDEG area of the curriculum, but in primary and early years as well, it's been highly used. It supports numeracy and maths, as you're already aware, and creativity has been given a huge boost in Higgius, how good is our early learning childcare, and also the Realising the Ambition document. So the 3D and design concepts and creativity has been really pushed to the forefront, and that's hugely beneficial for design technology and the design process that our young people might be using, and subsequently the meta skills as well that they're developing. Right the way through, all the way through, although 3D design or specifically designing may not be explicitly listed in all the areas, there's elements of it that can be applied to a range of the E's and O's. So again, thinking with that broad general education hat on, how this could be used to support transition, there's lots of ways in which young people and practitioners are engaging with 3D and design, but also lots of ways that might support progression across the curriculum. Kirsty McFall is also on the chat, so she's Senior Education Officer at Education Scotland. My name's Jenny Mackay, I'm one of the Digital Skills Officers. We're monitoring the chat, so if you please pop in if anything you want to add there. I can see it, I just can't see it on the screen I'm presenting from. So if you have anything to contribute as well, either pop your hand up or pop it in the chat. I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially around transition stuff with the 3D in the design. The reason I mentioned Realising the Ambition, because I recognise as all of you as secondary teachers are maybe wondering why I'm discussing a document that's early years focused. But right from the early years, it's talking to our practitioners and our young people around using digital technologies to experience things virtually. And I've got some examples of how people are using that from right the way through from our early years right on. So again, maybe they don't have access to or full understanding of the concepts, but how they're then able to engage with resources that increase their understanding of a concept, of a piece of work that they're doing, or even to design their own models that can be used, and I'll talk about that as well. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Julie and Chris from V&A Dundee, and they're going to talk to you about all the design work that they have going on and resources you may wish to use.
Thanks, Jenny. Oh, I've got feedback there. Yeah, hi folks. First of all, my name's Chris Lewis. I'm the Skills Development Officer at V&A Dundee currently, and I actually don't have a background in design itself. My background actually originates in the social subjects, but then kind of developed through an IDL post up into an attainment post, and then the seconded teacher to V&A Dundee. I'll let Julie say a little bit about herself.
So can you hear me first of all, because I can't see whether my mic's off, so that's fine, Chris. Thank you for letting me know. So my name is Julie Muir. I'm the Learning Manager at V&A Dundee within the Learning team, and I look after schools, young people and families.
Fab. So we're going to just talk to you a little bit today about a couple of things, but we're going to start off with sharing how V&A Dundee is approaching as a national asset. You know, wherever you are in the country, it's an asset that you can use, be it to come to us physically or to engage with digitally. And there'll be contact details at the end about how you can do that. But how we're approaching design for learning and how we're approaching the implementation of design in the curriculum, secondary, primary, early years, all different stages and across the curriculum as well. Very conscious, as Jenny said at the start, that you are all CDT teachers, so you're all coming from, you know, a place that design is absolutely your wheelhouse. So apologies if at any point we're covering anything that you already know. Permit us just to ramble on if that's okay, and feel free to ask any questions. But what we're just doing is sort of sharing what we share with teachers at all ages, stages, levels, and that kind of thing as well. So just to give you that overview.
So I think the first thing that we were going to do was ask you a question, which we know you all know the answer to. But if you just want to answer these questions in the chat, just as a bit of a warm-up, I know you're probably tired. There's been hailstones at one end of Dundee, sunshine at the other. I'm not sure where you guys are all from, but if you can pop in... Well, we know that's fake though, Chris. Come on now. It was a real time, but not today. Can you pop in the chat the following? Design can be... And
yes.
design... Sorry, design can be.
Let's start with design can be. Yeah, so just in the chat, if you could just finish that sentence, put as many different answers as you want. How would you finish that sentence if someone asked you, just, you know, off the top of your head, design can be what? And you can either write the whole sentence or just put the words that you want to finish it with, and we'll just get a bit of an idea.
And also, Chris, I'm just going to say,
I like that. Design can be fun.
I can't see the chat box from where I am right now, so if you can read them out, that would be great.
I'll keep an eye. We've got design can be anything. Absolutely. That's multiple answers there. That's great to see. That's fab. The start of something amazing. Yes, love that. Awesome. Okay, so we've got a few there. Feel free to keep popping them in as you keep going. Design can be creative. A few more. Quite like that, the start of something amazing. That's really nice. Design can be fluid, inspiring. Yeah, absolutely, all these things. Okay, so the next one then, Julie's already given you a bit of a sneak peek. I like that, sorry. Just to go back, design can be something that makes your brain really hurt. Absolutely.
Agree with that.
You've clearly been in the office with Julie and I today. So the next one, design isn't always. So design isn't always easy. Absolutely. Design isn't always simple.
Yep.
Again, I agree with both of those, especially after this week.
Yep. It's only Tuesday, Chris.
I know, that's saying something. Absolutely. So design isn't always needed. Oh, I like that. That's interesting.
Controversial.
No.
I like it though.
I like that. That's awesome. That's the kind of, oh, someone's put a wee shocked face. That's the kind of situation when I just want to start having a conversation, a wee philosophical.
Well, I think that's a really important point, because actually sometimes things can be over-designed as well. If they're not done in the right way, if the process isn't right, they can absolutely be overly designed.
There's a picture doing the rounds on Twitter at the moment of stairs that are absolutely just and actually that one as well. They're not needed and they're not functional. They are not the kind of stairs that you would like to try and go up and down. I'll try and see if I can find it and share it. It's an interesting one. So yeah, this is really just to kind of myth bust. And again, you guys are working within this kind of field all the time, day in, day out, and you're teaching to young people who are, some of whom are engaged with design, some of whom I'm sure are not interested at all. And so you'll always be kind of coming up against these perceptions and kind of challenging various different perceptions. And I suppose that's what we're doing at V&A Dundee when we're trying to kind of put out there to all year groups this idea of design. We are trying to kind of bust some of those myths as well. I'll let you take this, Julie.
So this is just a quote that kind of, I think, sums up, which again, I know we're kind of preaching to the choir here, but design does have the potential and the power to improve lives and places in lots of different ways, and we definitely use it within the learning department to empower people to kind of have their own agency, as Leonie says, and it can change the world around them for the better in the whole, if it's needed. Just to go back to that first comment that somebody wrote there about sometimes it's not always needed. But I think it's really important that this is what we aspire to use design for, this quote from Leonie. And then following on from that, there's sometimes a question that we're asked, and again, I know that we might be going over things that you guys already agree with or that you don't agree with, but we're happy to have those conversations about why it's important to have design within the curriculum, especially from an ideal perspective. But I'm going to let Chris talk about that since he is teacher in the virtual room on the next slide.
Thank you. So why design? Well, again, you know this, but let me just cover this. And again, this is how we take, your subject and we kind of put it out there to other people. Design is creative problem solving. That's the kind of idea that we like to put out there. You guys will be victim of this as well, but often when design is talked about in a school setting, anyone, whether it be pupils, parents, sometimes even management structures, will hear the word design and they'll instantly put it together with art and design, put it in a box, and that's it. They won't think necessarily about the bigger impact that it can make and the wider links that design can have. Whereas we all know that design is more than just one subject area. It's accessible for all levels, all year groups, and it permeates every area of the curriculum. So, we're forever saying that actually, yes, design is STEM. Design is digital literacy and engagement. Design is expressive arts and creative industries. And those three actually might not surprise people. Design is technologies, but then when we get into design as health and well-being, it does make some people think, oh, wait, how? Wait, how is that? Or design is social and cultural influences, bringing in your social subjects and that kind of thing. And again, people start to think, oh, hang on a minute. Design can be used in all of these curricular areas. To us, design is just as a fundamental skill in terms of understanding as literacy and numeracy, because actually to have that creative problem solving technique under your belt, whether you be 5, 15 or into the world of work 25 or 85, it's key for just getting about in your daily life, whether it be world of work and that kind of thing. So we've got some of the things that design skills actually bring about. And, feel free to sort of steal this and use it because, particularly when talking to your management teams, again, I know you all know this, but sometimes it's handy just to have it articulated and written down. Design uses creativity to promote positive mental health. It develops empathy, communication skills, encourages growth mindset. It's problem solving. It makes solution-orientated young people most of the time. I'm sure there are situations where you have not had solution-orientated young people in front of you. And it develops stamina and resilience. And actually that one there, along with the positive mental health, is something that I think is becoming increasingly important. And, as a secondary teacher, I've experienced, working with young people where that is an issue that they're struggling with. And actually a design-based task, a creative problem-solving task, can give them that sense of success and achievement and actually develop that stamina and resilience. So you're so lucky to be working in a design-based subject. You've got so much behind you. It's fantastic.
So the next one was just about where those design skills can take you. And you guys, again, you'll all know this, where those design skills can take you into actually positive destinations after school or potential professional careers that you might want to do. And I suppose just to go over our kind of like the double diamond within that as well and where those skills sit. You'll all be familiar with the double diamond that is discover, define, develop and deliver. We're all about the D's this evening as well as 3D printing, which is this is the kind of obviously the go-to method as far as design process goes, and the one that we tend to use, and you'll see it up on the wall within. Oh, you might see it up on the wall if it actually comes up. Don't know where it's gone. There we go. It's normally on the wall in the learning corridor. Can you see that now, Chris? Is it disappeared? It came back.
I can see it, and I'm really sorry. That was my fault. I'm playing with the PowerPoint as you present. Sorry.
Christopher, stop doing your homework last minute. That's terrible. So the way that we talk about design process is explore, imagine, develop and solve. And it is basically, it is the design process from Design Council, but this aligns kind of core to the curriculum, and it also just gives people that, I suppose, that trajectory of you can go forward then back, and it just makes just a better sense to kids especially, and particularly young people in that kind of S1, S2 area, that it's okay to make mistakes and to go back on it and redesign it and start again from scratch, because sometimes you can get to a point where you realise actually this is the wrong path we went down. Am I going to click onto a special picture, Christopher?
You are, so I was just going to share the picture. Just for context, these are the stairs that I was talking about when we were talking about design isn't always perfect, needed, or functional. I don't know about you, but I certainly wouldn't want to be trying to climb those stairs or come down them, particularly at the end of a long Saturday night. So
Yeah.
maybe that's an example of design not necessarily being needed, functional. I don't know. I'm happy to be proved wrong. So
Okay, doke. So moving on to the next slide is all about task debrief. And again, we are aware that we do not need to have this conversation with you guys because you write briefs all the time, not tasks. But just to go over, this is something that we do talk about a lot, which is in a task you're told what to do, such as design a house, and it's quite narrow focused. It prohibits that creative problem solving. Should we maybe ask people to write a version of this in the chat?
Actually, yeah. This is something that we come across a lot. And again, you know, as Julie said, it tends to be within those areas of the curriculum that aren't dealing with design on a day in, day out basis. But actually, it's one that sometimes, you know, even we kind of find ourselves, you sit down to do something and you automatically just write a task, not because you're deliberately thinking, but just because sometimes it's where your brain goes. But actually, reworking it into a brief is something worth kind of really considering. And as Julie said, you know, design a house, it's very clear, you know, it's very kind of, you know, if you ask primary kids or even secondary kids to draw a house, they'll all draw much the same, to be honest. They'll draw a pitched roof, they'll draw 4 windows, a door in the middle, a chimney maybe, and a garage on the side if you're lucky. You know, they'll all kind of go with that very traditional house, and you won't get a huge amount of variation. The brief could be slightly different. So yeah, I don't know, do we want to ask people if they want to try and rework this into a brief of their choice? And just write it in the chat. There's no right or wrong answer, obviously. It's just a case of taking the task and actually reworking it into a brief. And then we'll share the one that we've got, but that's just one of many.
Yeah, and I think they might come up with a better one so we can potentially steal that for the next time. That's what exactly. I'm thinking. We can rinse these creatives for a better brief for next time.
Nice, yeah. Design an environment to provide shelter. That's fantastic, actually.
That's a really good one.
I actually really like that. That really opens up the options and how they're going to approach it. Great. Does anyone else want to add any? A living environment that enhances well-being. Again, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's deep.
Yeah, I like that though. So each of those two things are going to bring out completely different responses, and you know, from the young people. Whereas, and again, you know, you'll all be used to seeing this. That you know, design a house is something which design a poster is another one that drives me up the wall.
Oh, don't start me off on that. Shall I share our one, which now seems pathetic in comparison?
It's pretty poor. I'm gonna change that up.
So ours is a problem to solve would be design a place for 6 people to live and work. It's more towards a brief. But again, the ones that were shared in the chat were actually of a even better level than this.
Julie's currently copying and pasting.
I am copying and pasting, although I can't see the chat, so I'll need to do it once we're finished. And I'm conscious we're at about 14 minutes and we've got 6 minutes left that we said to chat about.
We'll create a habitat which promotes slow living. I like that.
Ooh,
nice.
That's good.
Well. Yeah. So I think those kind of elements of it are, you know, it's really important to kind of have that brief in place. But it's something that, again, as teachers, particularly if you're not working within the design field, you don't often maybe think about. And it's things that you can just get sort of habitually, you know, you're working at 100 miles an hour, trying to kind of plow out lessons for S1, S3, S5, back to S2, back to S6. And, you know, you're just kind of, you sometimes get caught up in the day-to-day of it. And sometimes it's important to sort of remind yourself and go back.
So I think the next slide is all about 2D to 3D, was
Yes.
where we're coming at. And this is very much about exploring by doing. And this is, again, we're probably singing to the choir here about you do this all the time, but we find that this is a really easy way of getting, particularly BGE students, to kind of think about what their idea might be on a flat piece of paper and how they go about realising that as a 3D model. And this is obviously, you'll all recognise, it's a Frank Gehry Maggie Centre model. There's one in our Scottish Design Galleries as well that you can actually see up close and personal. And then on the left-hand side of the screen, sorry, I didn't know my left from right there, you'll see that there's a kind of selection of a Design Busters kind of like, you know, design challenge within that as well. And the other thing to talk about is that power shift within prototyping. So as well as that 2D to 3D model is about what even is prototyping, because I think it's something that we come up against, and you might be similar, it might not, because you might have all this embedded, but about having a power shift with prototyping. So wrong is right, you know, it doesn't have to look finished. It's about making those mistakes and rejigging it and following that design process where you get to a prototype and then you realise that it's not quite right and you have to go back a couple of steps and fix it. But it's not a precious object, it's a live working drawing and something that can change. And again, you'll all know the story around Frank Gehry, but there is that story of him presenting to the board of Maggie's, and him, they present to the board, and he was cutting, you know, holes in walls to let light in as direct feedback from the users that he was designing for. And I think that's the beauty of that design process.
From a classroom perspective, you know, we all know that, you know, budgets are getting tighter all the time, and the ability to kind of, particularly for practical work, resources are always tighter. But one of the things that we always do at the museum is, just like the Frank Gehry example that Julie just gave there, is to use just paper or paper and masking tape only. One, it's sustainable, it can be easily recycled, but two, it's also, you're not having to deal with a number of resources, which means that you're cutting down on your departmental costs. The other element as well, obviously, is that by only giving one material, it can actually be more challenging, and particularly, you know, getting something to stand up and that kind of thing properly. If they've only got paper and masking tape, they're going to have to come up with more creative ways of getting it to work, rather than if they've got all the kind of additional fancy materials. So it's just another way of framing it, you know, as an additional challenge, an additional kind of growth mindset challenge, I suppose, for young people. But it's also helping you out in terms of your kind of classroom sustainability and financial sustainability as well. The prototyping is also an interesting thing, because again, if your young people or anything like the young people that I've so often worked with, they think when they start something that it has to be absolute perfection first time, and particularly if they are doing a bit of drawing or a bit of 2D work or modelling, and they make a mistake, they can get quite frustrated, and it's like, no, that's it. And depending on the young person, that can be kind of put it to the side. And, you know, that perseverance and that kind of going back to what we said earlier about resilience and that kind of thing is incredibly important. So yeah, just kind of having a look at how that prototyping works, but it can be an important thing to share with young people for a life skill as well, you know, that not everything has to be right first time.
Absolutely. So we're also just going to take you through a few objects which are in the Scottish Design Galleries. Hopefully I've not skipped along too far. Just as a resource, you can use the Scottish Design Galleries at any point. There is lots of thing links and stuff that I'll come on to later where you can see certain objects. We have everything from, when we talk about 2D to 3D, the Cheviot, the Stag and the Black Oil pop-up set that you can see top left with John Byrne there, and then the Falkirk wheel model. We also have stuff in our hand-on collection as well with the Lego model, which was the first kind of prototype to try and make the Falkirk wheel work. There's obviously the Forth Road Bridge, there's the Oak Room within the centre of our galleries. We also have Lynn McLaughlin's 3D printed jewellery, which is a really nice kind of segue of 3D printed materials, but then they're hand dyed as well. So there's like that kind of handmade and digital creation. And then we've also got the Subspoon, that you can see right from the very first prototype on the left to the finished product on the right, which is very user-centered, and there's loads of stuff online that you can kind of access and things as well to do with that. And Grant Douglas was the user and the kind of designer, as well as the fact he's an engineer, suffers from cerebral palsy, and worked with 4S Studios in Glasgow to create that. I always say 4J because they're in Dundee, but that's the wrong ones. So yeah, moving on. So what influences designers? You guys know this again, so we're not going to go through it, but we are moving towards a more human-centered, going from human-centered, moving towards more planet-centered to do with sustainability. Within our IDL section, I suppose, it's, that's all very well, but I'm not a designer. It might be something that you guys come up against when you're trying to approach an IDL workshop, but that's something I'm going to let Chris speak about, all conscious that we've spoken for 21 minutes though.
Yes.
So Jenny might kick us out in the next few minutes.
Absolutely not at all.
Again,
honestly, it's great.
This is just, again, something that you all know, but obviously in attempting to kind of broaden your links with other subjects, which is something that we're all being encouraged to do, and make those kind of links that these subjects don't live in isolation, that they live in partnership with all the other different curricular areas. Design is one of these ones that you're so fortunate, and I'm a little bit jealous actually, of you as CDT teachers, because you've got this opportunity to work so closely with so many different departments and subject areas and curricular areas, to take the subject that they're working on, or the topic, or the set of circumstances that you find yourself in, whether it be a whole school approach that's being undertaken, whether it be one specific topic that's being looked at in the history department that particular month, or whether it be, the set of circumstances the school find themselves in, for example, the school's merging with another one or something like that. You can take those and you can use design and you can apply it to your design lesson, and it really kind of brings the design element alive. It's something that, again, I'm quite guilty of, is that, often, we can get into this kind of habitual way of pulling out the same the worksheets every year, which, you've used kind of 10 years, 15 years previous. And you're like, actually, do you know what? Adapting those just very, very slightly, taking the same core skills that are there, but adapting them to a new set of circumstances or a new set of lessons or whatever's happening as a whole school, can really bring it alive and make the lesson and the fundamental points that you're trying to get through from that lesson just come alive in a different way for young people, obviously. But it also works in reverse, because in other subjects around the school, there are teachers who are desperately looking to find new ways to enliven and jazz up their lessons to make them more relevant to the day-to-day lives of young people. And actually, one of the ways in which they can do that is through design. It's by using that kind of design methodology within their teaching to actually make it more relevant, make it real, and make it more applicable to their lives. But also, not just in the lesson, they can use it for their own kind of teaching practice as well, to change up what that looks like. So it's very much a tool that works as a two-way street. And I say you're so fortunate, and I'm conscious that I'm speaking to folks that are already doing it. But these were just some examples that we gave to some teachers who weren't from a design background, and they're very naive, they're very simple, very deliberately, just to make it very clear how they can be applied in different settings. And again, you'll be aware of many multiple different ways that this can be pulled out. But just take a minute just to have a look through these, and you'll just get a taster of the things that we've been saying to people. But yeah, so do reach out, because you are experts in design in your school, and there will be other people sitting in other departments and other faculty areas who are desperate to bring in some of what you've got into their lessons. And it's a fantastic opportunity for some collaboration and cross-curricular work.
Okay. So I was going to say, we could probably just skip over this bit, couldn't we? But this is a really good, I suppose this is just another slide that you can think about to open up those conversations with, in the same way that we have to, as a design museum, open up those conversations with people who don't consider themselves designers. This is us trying to put kind of designers and teachers in that kind of same group, because they do the same work, but they just need to identify that they're already doing it. And art and design teachers and CDT teachers don't need that convincing, because they're already doing it, but it's there anyway, if that might help some of those conversations. So I suppose just the last bit that we're going to just fly through a little bit, which I think will be really interesting and probably quite exciting for CDT teachers is Plastics Remaking Our World is due to open at V&A Dundee from October the 29th until February the 5th. There's, Chris, you're about to say something? Sorry.
No, just to say that the kind of overarching thing with plastics is it's not necessarily about plastics being bad. It's about, sorry, you were probably going to say this, it's not about plastics being bad, it's about how plastics can be taken and how you can, reuse plastics as a form of continuous recycling, or how they can be repurposed after the end of their current life in a different way. So it's not completely about getting rid of plastics, it's recognising that plastics are, a vital part of life when it comes to medical technology and that kind of thing. But actually, how do we then move that forward and how do we develop it?
Yeah, and so just from that very part, the exhibition structure is kind of divided into 3 sections about what is the problem, how did we get here, and what next. And again, as Chris says, it's not about saying it's all bad, but yourselves as CDT teachers, design can help with this, and also materiality is super important within that as well. Like what you choose to make a product out of, is that product even necessary? There's so many like social and cultural, topics that you can investigate with that as well. There's a huge emphasis on recycling, but not necessarily always just recycling, rhino bricks, all that kind of stuff. The mineral that's been recreated by like making tiles out of recycled textiles and glass. It's a huge amount of stuff. But probably the bit that will interest you the most is there is potentially going to be a workshop area where there'll be like a plastic shredder, much like a lot of CDT departments have at school, about reusing plastic. So whether it's shredding plastic bottles and creating the extruder where you put them into a mould. I'm saying words that I don't understand now because I'm not a CDT teacher, but that's why we have potentially 2 amazing plastic experts coming into that workshop space, but that is a place that you'll be able to engage with. And the last thing I suppose that we want to say about is...
I will say, Julie, you mentioned there that a lot of CDD departments, I think a lot of CDD departments would like to have them.
Would like to have one, sorry.
In the chat. I think some would be fortunate to have them. Certainly we've been to a CD department that did have one, and it was fantastic what they were doing. But, it's one of those things that... but it'd be a great opportunity for them to come and see it and then go back with the ask to senior management.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose that there's lots of things to explore to help with those design challenges. To think about that design, develop and 3D print. If you scan that QR code, it'll take you to our thing links online, and there's everything from designing a DJ booth as an environment and a space, thinking back to our design briefs before, as well as from our Now Accepting Contactless exhibition. You can still investigate that, where there's a huge amount of CDT links within that exhibition, and it's absolutely wonderful. You can investigate them as you see fit online. If you don't know about things like, can't say enough good stuff about it other than like it's really adaptable. It has personalization and choice within it, and it also can read out loud as well. And having a teenager at home who you heard earlier, if you can take any effort out of learning anything, the better. So it's all there, but if you do need further information, you can please just get in touch. We've also got...
In terms of those resources, they're all linked to the curriculum as well, so they've also linked to the relevant E's and O's and curricular areas. Not always necessarily CDT linked or linked to the expressive arts or the technologies, but they have got links that do kind of go across the curriculum. So again, if you were speaking to colleagues in other curricular areas who were keen to get involved, there's potential for kind of ideal kind of cross-curricular collaborations through these. There's everything from, as Julie said, nightclub design, linking back to our Mary Quant exhibition, and the Now Accepting Contactless one, which Jules mentioned, but just to give you a bit of context for those that maybe didn't get a chance to see it, that was all about how design was used to adapt very quickly to the COVID-19 pandemic from the outbreak. So it's everything from cardboard coffins that were used in parts of South America to all the various different changes and that happened in the medical profession to things that happened within our home. It's very, very product based. So there's lots of information there, as well as some activities and challenges that you could download, adapt and use in whatever way.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also, for that more kind of probably earlier BGE, there is like Design Buster resources that have videos that go with them, as well as a whole host of other learning resources that the link that you can't quite see there because we've badly made it a light colour, but there is a lot of stuff there as well. There is also our Skills Design Challenge, although it's not live anymore. There is a lot of like there's a presentation that you can use and put up in the class if you wanted to kind of like tackle a social topic within the class. The Skills Design Challenge was originally based around how to tackle loneliness and isolation pre-pandemic. If only we'd known, we probably could have made some money on it. But yeah, it's all there for you to use and develop. There's also just some other slides that we're going to share with you that we don't need to go through, but about developing a design-based lesson plan for your classroom scenario, and just some kind of templates and things that we kind of help send out to other people to kind of, you know, look into that more. And there's also lots and lots of questions, you know, there for you to answer, and the school's email to get in touch. And anything else you can add?
Sorry, Jenny's just also posted in the chat a link to the Design for Our Times exhibition, which is on currently but ends quite soon. However, the link probably, I would imagine, will stay live. And again, this is kind of links nicely actually with the plastics exhibition. It's a whole host of different designers who have been, they're all Scottish designers, am I right in saying that? Yeah, they are, aren't they?
New graduates, or have graduated within the last, I think, maximum 5 years, and all looking at sustainability and how they can use different forms of materials that are either recycled or reproduced. And there's everything from mycelium to mineral, clay bricks, all this stuff. It's amazing.
Using things found in charity shops. And
chandeliers made up of
everything from you know the kind of simple down to the it's great.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and come back to you in the meantime as well. I thank you very much for listening. If you do have any questions, you can pop them in the chat, or you can send them to Jenny and she will get them to us. And we will also share the presentation with you as well.
Thank you so much, Chris and Julie. We've got one question coming straight away. Do you also cover bus travel beyond Dundee? So I know that there's lots of schools joining us from across Scotland.
So I'm going to say at the moment we can cover almost all of the travel from outside of Dundee, but we are still waiting to have it confirmed. So my advice would be get in quick, even if it's for later on, and we'll see what we can do.
But we've brought a school over from the Isle of Islay, you know, and that kind of thing as well. So yeah, no, definitely, it's you know, V&A Dundee is a national resource. So
yeah, we are absolutely, and I think that it's really important that when plastics opens, there's so many. It's open for a very, very short amount of time, and clearly there was nobody in the room when they decided on those dates. But we know that we've kind of got November as our golden time. That's going to be the best time, and we are happy to get booked up now if it's something that you know that you want to do come November. So just get in touch, and as I say, we'll leave our contact. We've got all our contact details with Jenny and stuff as well. So
plastics runs October 29th. It opens.
Yeah, October 29th to the 5th of February.
Thank you both so much. There's absolutely tons in there, and I think there's lots for everybody. Please do use the chat again if you want to ask Chris or Julie any questions. But again, moving forward, there's the team space. So if anybody does have a question they want to ask, I can get it to them and put the chat back in there for you. But thank you both so much, because I think the range of design and the questions that you're asking are questions that we could share with colleagues, peers, and again, it's that trying to build that interdepartmental or even cluster approach to developing that design understanding that's so useful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm going to say one last thing just before we go, just because we have got other people from lots of different areas as well. We can and have done digital tours. I'm not saying that they're going to be of the standard of Digital Education Scotland, but if you're willing to kind of have a bit of a bumpy ride, we can absolutely organise digital tours, no problem. So as well, if that's a bump in the road for you, just get in touch and we can sort that out.
Super. I'm sure lots of people will take you up on that. And this recording will also be shared on our YouTube channel as well. So that might be a long tour. You might be on the road for a while. Thank you both very much. I really appreciate you coming and speaking to everybody. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen, and just building on what Chris and Julie have been discussing, I'm just going to come into here. So I'm not going to go through all of what creativity and design are, because you are, as Chris and Julie have stated, you're the experts in this. Design and artistic design and engineering design is that creative approach, and this is something we know that you are all incorporating into it, but it's also something that we're trying to foster right across BGE to ensure that our young people are, once they get more familiar with the initial replication kind of mode, that they then start to apply concepts of design thinking, and they're using things like prototype concept models, etc. when they're building. So I thought it might be useful, and again I'll make all of these slides available in the file space if that would be of use, just to kind of whiz through some resources that are available. So, and also to explain to you how maybe in your primary feeder classes and beyond, that some of your learners might be initiating their design process. So often if they're coming up with their design concept maps, which I know that you're all going to be hugely familiar with, they may be looking at different approaches. So they're looking at the contextual side of it, where they research, and then looking at the functionality of it. And then they might break down into the aesthetics. So again, that's really similar to what you would be familiar with. We then introduce them to using a range of different software within primary and early years. And again, this is looking at supporting the amazing work that your department goes on. I think I'm secretly at heart a frustrated design technology teacher, because my background's primary and early years. But getting young people to use a range of tools to either design their own model, initially perhaps identify how something has been created, then replicate it, and then alter and amend their design. And that's been done through a range of different tools. So Blender, which some of you may be familiar with and is industry standard tool, it's used a lot around the game industry, but again it has huge flexibility in how it could be used for design of objects. Also Autodesk, as you're all totally aware, is amazing. However, it's also got Tinkercad, which is predominantly used, and again it's introducing our young people to those concepts, and I'll show you through those. There's apps. So again, if you have learners who perhaps are still developing fine motor skills or need some accessibility resources that might be more suited to their needs, Gravity Sketch is an amazing app for everyone. It has the additional feature of being pencil, so you could use it with virtual headsets and hand sets. It can also be used with virtual pencils and things like that. So it's a little bit more art based than it is product based, I would probably describe it as. And Paint 3D perhaps just for those initial sketching thoughts of ideas. Again, if you have digital inking available, it's a really nice way to incorporate, and anybody with a Windows 10 device has that available to them. It doesn't have to be a tablet either, which is what makes it really positive. So I thought also I would share some examples of this before I go on. So this is a teacher of a primary school who had been working with the 3D project that they were going to be getting, the 3D printer, and they then linked out to their the school's building manager. They got the plans and they were replicating the building. So obviously they're not looking at how everything joins together, they're looking at a reconstruction, but it is introducing that sense of scale, the idea of modelling, and then hopefully looking at the next step would be then looking at like influences that it might have had from architecture, etc. And again, using a range of different tools and looking at things in 3D through virtual headsets. A primary school that I worked with as part of a national challenge, this was primary 7s, and they did this was like the first things that they created, so I just really wanted to flag up like the level of stuff. And again, scale wise, there's still development, and it's not a case of teaching bad habits, I don't think. It's more a case of allowing them to explore it in a simplistic tool such as Tinkercad, which can be used to do amazingly in-depth resources. But again, creating their sketches, creating their prototypes, how do they want it, and then starting with that replication. I'm going to come out because also when your young people at secondary are producing their concepts for something that they have designed, they might want to do a presentation using something more standard. And here we can see we have a young person created their school. So this is a school. If you Google this, it's Gleeblands Primary in Dundee, and this young person has created the model. It can then be rotated around, and they can import their model using an OBJ file into PowerPoint, and it can be animated, so we can have it swinging back and forward and rotating, and they can interact with it. So again, if they're presenting using something like, for example, Cisco Little Big Awards, they could have created their object or their design solution and be presenting it in sort of like a Dragon's Den scenario, but it makes it that little bit more professional. And again, if I just go back into present mode, linking up with that IDL, so young people created a full a scaled model, which was really impressive, of the ship Discovery. They then incorporated that in a badge which was rolled out across the city, and also using it for things like enterprise challenges where they produce something, design it, produce it and sell it, or in this case IDL for social studies. And then youngest learners, so I mentioned young learners just right at the start. So this was a project that the young people were involved in nursery school. They identified that they wanted to update the park that was in the area. They worked with the university town planning and civil engineer students. So again, those students were coming in, they were working with them, they were talking about that DYW link, and then the young people were creating it. Just to prove that it wasn't just a whole load of shapes, they wanted to put a roundabout in, and I think this clip demonstrates it. So they made a roundabout, printed a roundabout, it didn't work. So they then worked out how many bits the roundabout was made up of, and put it in. So when we're thinking about progression, it's about making sure that schools are not encroaching in something that you're going to be doing, but how we can create a nice fluidity from young learners right the way through, so that they are engaging with these pieces of software, how they're integrating the design process into all aspects of their learning. And we know that, again, SDS 4.0, you know, that innovation branch of meta skills, where it's like sense making, creativity, tinkering, through those things, and curiosity, creative thinking. All of these were being exhibited by these young learners, and that goes for all of the people involved. And just so you could see the final result, that was the play park that came up, and the swing did swing, and the roundabout did spin. So lots of avenues that you're all really familiar with, how this the design process and 3D modelling can be used, but just, I'm going to come out of my presentation. This is a 3D printed chair that a robot created, but I'm going to come out and I'm going to just quickly nip into here. For those of you who are not familiar with Tinkercad, although I know you'll be familiar with Autodesk, this is essentially what Tinkercad looks like. Again, with any digital product, we would totally say speak to your local authority, digital leads. It's imperative that you do that if you're planning on using anything like this with learners. But again, you can see challenges that you may be already carrying out in your class can be incorporated, and that's maybe a nice way for you to have like a cluster challenge for your secondary, so that you have a similar base product that allows for transition. Your models can be created. To create a model, if you've not seen it, and I'm not going to show you because that would honestly be teaching you how to do your own job. The base plate, you've got the ruler, it's made up of core shapes. There are a range of other options, including pieces of hardware that can be printed and fixed. So again, if you're thinking about that, creating something new or adapting something, so if we're looking at the functional aspect of it, but then looking at perhaps adapting the conceptual idea of something that's already there and looking at the material approach of it, so making something that's familiar and something that's new and exciting. this is a really nice way to do it. They can also print out an update, and it can be exported in a range of different formats. And files export as OBJ, STL and glib files, and for laser cutting and CNC SVG files. So it's completely interactive. It's really clear. We do a whole session on that. However, you're all more than familiar, I'm sure, with this, so I'm not going to show you, but you can see how straightforward and simple this is for young people. And again, they're having to problem solve, like how would that print if it was the other way around, and it's about looking at the math side of things, looking at the design side of things, looking at sustainability, what materials can they print in, how can they use the least amount of filament, and again running it through different software. For staff, if you're not aware, there's a whole range of resources in their blog that they have, which is fabulous. There's a whole range of different videos around it. And if you do want to use it with a class, but again, please speak to your local authority, you can create a class. It can be done anonymously, as in the learners are anonymous, not you're anonymous. And if we go in here, you can see you only need to put in a minimum of 2 digits for an identifier, and young people join with a class code. There's a whole range of information in learning and teaching, and if young people go in, there's a whole set of lessons they can work their way through again. So thinking about that, maybe they're not quite at the stage that you are looking for in 3rd level, but this would maybe be a nice way to introduce them to a concept, or like I say, that whole transitional approach, setting a design challenge and asking them to create a CAD model. And again, it's really, I really do think it's really important that we make sure that all our young people are engaging with this. Like, CAD's been around since, in some form, like since the 60s, so we really need to get our young people engaged with it and creating and designing. So again, we're not affiliated with Elite Education. However, if you haven't seen their resources around design and 3D printing, thinking about DIY aspects of this, in their page, they are funded by Ultimaker in the background, but in their page they have a huge section on their education hub. They have a range of individual ambassadors. For example, Rob Bennett from Bloodhound is one of their ambassadors, and they also work with like RAF. So Create Education has this community hub, which when you go in, it might be useful for you to see if you're doing like a digital week in your setting, or you're doing a focus on industry, maybe you want somebody that's using like BIM for laser scanning, you're doing something around civil engineering, etc., or graphic design, you could be contacting industry partners that are linked and associated and affiliated with them. There's also a list of ambassadors, like I mentioned, and there's a list of maker spaces. But up in the resources, there's an entire section dedicated to and for by secondary resources. So it's practitioners as well as industry partners, as well as Create Education, which is the byproduct of this. And they have a whole range of resources for everything from videos on what 3D printing is right the way through. So I would recommend checking it out. Also, I mentioned Gravity Sketch. If you haven't seen it, this is their site. As I understand it, the web-based version is a paid version. However, the app is free at present, and again you can see it's a very flexible model. And just to highlight Blender, you do need to download it, so again speak to your local authorities, and there's a whole range of resources on there, but there are some tools that you may find of interest. And then just quickly, so as with CAD being invented in like 63 by Sutherland, around Sketchpad, not SketchUp but Sketchpad, 3D printing came into place in the 80s. So now 4D printing and 5D printing are around. So 4D printing is nearly 10 years old. It was the brainchild at MIT, and essentially these videos will play. I'll not play them for time, but 4D printing is essentially where something that has been printed, the material interacts with another material. In this case, in this video that plays, is water. And it changes. So again, there's lots of links there for industry with like biomechanics, nanomedicines, etc. There's lots of different options that has implications for building in remote areas as well. And for 5D printing, which came out of Merrill, not Mirrell, that Julie was speaking about, but Merrill, which is Mitsubishi Electric Research Lab. It is where everything is printed on a non-flat bed, and there's 5 axes, so it completely rotates around, and it means that the strength of the print is stronger. There is a greater ability to have like curves and things like that. So again, applications around biomechanics, maybe solving solutions that are for the space industry, etc. So there's lots and lots and lots of potential for those, but they are already in existence. So it's really it's important that we make sure that our young people are ready for the resources that are there now. So just to make you aware, they're quite cool to even just discuss with your young people as well. What will be next? I don't know what 6D printing might look like. So on the slides, if I just go back to presenting. So Tinkercad, Blender, Create Education, Paint 3D, and again, if you've not seen it, it's really, really simple, but it does allow that kind of idea mapping that you might want to put down when you're using different approaches, or even when you're drafting up your conceptual approach to your design and mapping things down. It then allows you to export it again, and it also gives you playback. We'd recommend the design section in Adobe Education Exchange if you haven't already seen it, but I'm sure many of you have. And then Gravity Sketch, and all of these are hyperlinked. Just to let you see what that looks like, that's the sort of tools that you get at the side. So there are those 2D, 3D shapes that you can incorporate, and then you can export it in a range of different ways, including AR and downloading it. So I recognise that was a whistle-stop tour, but I'm sure that, like me, the design aspects that Julie and Chris spoke about are hugely useful. All of those resources that they have available, I'll make sure I put a link into your team, and that this recording is also available for you. As ever, DigiLearn Scott, the team that Kirsty and I are from, has a whole range of resources available, and the YouTube channel can be linked to from the top. If you haven't seen it, again, thinking about those transitional things, because it goes up to 2nd level, you may want to take a look, if you've not already seen it, but I'm sure you have, about what digital learning might look like. It's just a really useful book, and the professional learning community on Glow for technologies. And like I say, these QR codes and scans will all be in the file space